Chapter 1. At Sea, 1832. My name is Rachel Dunne. I am not a murderer. Rachel tightened her grip on the ship's wooden rail, as if she might choke into silence the echo of her own voice. Better to focus on the receding sight of Ireland's blue-green hills, seek to memorize every bounding stream, every wisp of misty fog, every rubble-walled farmer's field, than to remember. For who knew how long, if ever, it would be before she saw her beloved homeland again. "Oh, mother," she murmured over the slap of the paddle wheels and the hiss of the steam, the scree of persistent seagulls skimming the boat's wake. How did it come to this? This parting, this going, diorlacht, this exile. Mother was not there to answer Rachel's question. They could only afford ship's passage for one, and Rachel was the one who had to leave. Mother and the rest had stayed behind in Carlo to mend the damage Rachel had never meant to cause, restore the honour of the Dunne name in a town already prone to dislike them for their English ways. Once Rachel had been a healer, but she could not heal the scar upon her family. No more than she'd been able to heal poor Mary Ferguson, who had died so quickly and so quietly. Even Rachel had been at a loss to explain the how and the why. I would never harm the ill. I am a banaltroch, a healer. If the thought didn't hurt so much, Rachel might laugh. She had vowed never to let herself be a healer again. Against the cool spray of the sea, Rachel knotted her fringe shawl around her neck, the charcoal wool warming her skin while her thoughts chilled her soul, and wrapped her arms about her waist. Cove of Cork dwindled, its pale stucco and limestone homes that snaked along the hillside became indistinct. Its proud fleet of yachts bobbing at anchorage transformed into specks of white upon the cerulean blue waters. 2 islands, bristling with shore houses, obliterated the last of the view. The paddle steamer chugged past the looming stone forts that guarded the mouth of the bay, Forts Camden and Carlisle, names Mrs. O'Rourke had helpfully supplied when they'd set out. Next, according to Rachel's travelling companion, would be the lighthouse guarding the shoals, white splashed with waves, and then the Irish Sea, and England. Mother's birthplace, but an alien land to Rachel. She reached into the pocket hidden deep within the folds of her brown kersey skirts, her fingers closed around the muslin bag tied with the grosgrain ribbon to keep the contents intact. Dried leaves of mint, pennyroyal and gentian. Mother had pressed the sachet into Rachel's hand when they parted in Carlo, a final gift as Rachel had readied to climb onto the post-chase bound for Cork Harbour. Her mother's soft green eyes had brimmed with tears she'd kept at bay to stop the twins, clinging to Mother's skirts, from crying. Poor Sarah and Ruth, too young to understand what was happening, and Nathaniel, trying hard to be the man of the family, straight-backed and sober, but at 14, not truly ready for the role. Rachel clutched the bag. The mixture of herbs was meant to help Rachel, should she feel faint or dizzy. If she had not fainted in a stifling Carlo courtroom with her fate in jeopardy, however, she would not faint now. Lifting it to her nostrils, she inhaled, the aroma pungent and sweet. Right then, she would rather the herbs had been dried heather from the knoll between their house, or the lavender her mother used to scent the linens, or maybe snippings from the peppery scarlet nasturtiums that grew by the kitchen door. The aromatic bits of her life. "Ho! Stop now!" A proper English gentleman, coat collar turned up to graze his whiskers, shouted at a scrum of boys, quick to turn the quarterdeck into a playfield. They shouted back a string of Gaelic curses and chased each other along the length of the planking. "Don't let those hooligans bother you, miss," the man said. "Oh, they do not bother me, sir. I have a brother who is just as high-spirited." His gaze made a quick assessment of Rachel's status as a lady. He could not fail to note her serviceable dress, well-worn shawl, and Irish red hair, and find her lacking. Heading for England for work, I presume?" "I have a situation with a physician in London." She shuddered anew at the thought. At the irony. After all she had been through to find herself in service to a medical man. "You do?" The gentleman's tone curled upward with a cynical lift. Rachel lifted her chin. "I do." He cocked his disbelieving eyebrow and shook his head. What next? The man tapped the brim of his hat and hastened off, his attitude a foretaste of the reception Rachel expected she would receive in London. The boys taunted him as they tossed the bundled rags they were using as a ball over his head. They brushed past Rachel, boisterous, laughing, seemingly untroubled that the slither of earth that they had called home probably all their lives was inching out of reach. Rachel faced the dwindling shoreline. Then I should be untroubled like they are. For what good does it do me to mourn what I have lost? Rachel looked down at the bag she clutched and felt hope for the first time in weeks, months actually. Slowly she unwound the ribbon and tucked it in her pocket. Turning the bag upside down, she released the dry leaves, flecks of slate green, caught by the wind. She dropped the bag after them. I have your strength, Mother. I do not need herbal remedies when your love bolsters my spine. Rachel watched the speck of cream fabric until it was dragged under water by the churn of the floatboards. I shall do very well in London, and some day we shall be reunited. I promise you that. Because to do anything less was to fail, and she never wanted to fail again. Chapter 2. London 3 days later. Well, Edmunds? Asked Hathaway, leaning across the bed to prop up his patient, too weak, too faint to sit up on her own. Resting his ear against the circular ivory earplate, James Edmunds moved the stethoscope down the woman's hunched back. Her breathing was shallow, rapid, and he could hear the thickness in her lungs. No sound in the low portion of the left lung at all. This tissue hepatized into a useless mass, or much of the right lung for that matter. She wheezed as she struggled to drag in air and expelled a shuddering cough. Acute pneumonia. Death. Well, Edmunds, echoed Mr. Bolton from the spot he'd taken up by the window. The family surgeon tapped his fingers against his elbows. Are you finished with that contraption? It's a stethoscope, not a contraption. It's a bit of wood tubing and a bunch of poppycock is what it is. What colour has her sputum been? James asked Hathaway, ignoring Mr. Bolton's ridicule. When it comes up at all, it's rusty. Blood. No surprise. James set aside the stethoscope and released the woman's linen shift, the colour of the material not much different to the grey pallor of her flesh. With Hathaway's steady help, he lowered her onto a stack of thick feather pillows. A relation, aunt, cousin, sobbed quietly in the corner of the bedchamber. There would be more tears to come. Separating the cedar stethoscope into 3 pieces, James nestled them in their velvet-padded box and closed the lid. He caught Hathaway's watchful gaze and shook his head. No, his young colleague mouthed, face falling. Can I get back to my leeches, Mr. Edmunds? Mr. Bolton asked impatiently. The creatures squirmed in their bottles near his feet. The only cure for her condition, draw out the congestion in her lungs. You've had them on her since yesterday. The inverted Y-bit marks were still evident on her back. If they haven't worked by now... James wouldn't finish that sentence. He swept back the woman's hair, a blonde and honeyed colour of demerara sugar, her cheeks flushed from the fever that was burning her alive. He recalled seeing her at some social function long ago, in a teal silk gown with her hair dressed in pearls and feathers, smiling, charming everyone. Even Maria had commented on her poise and her beauty. All of that lost now. In her half-conscious state, she mouthed incoherently, drawing her relative to the bedside, who soothed, "Hush, my dear." The older woman looked around the edge of her lace-trimmed cap at James. He saw the question form on her face, the one he had been expecting. The 8 years he had spent doctoring hadn't taught him how to respond with cool indifference like his father had always done. Instead, James only felt disheartened, the loss another chink out of his armour of confidence. Soon, though, very soon, he would never have to face the question again. "Doctor?" The relation's eyes, puffy and red-rimmed, begged him for a hopeful answer. "I must consult with Dr. Hathaway, ma'am. He is her physician and will speak with you in a few minutes." James pressed her hand, the only reassurance he could offer, and stood setting the stethoscope box inside his medical bag. No more leeches, Mr. Bolton, if you agree, Dr. Hathaway. Whatever you say, Hathaway concurred. What? The surgeon scoffed, drawing himself up to his not insignificant height. What am I doing here if you two are not going to listen to me? James snapped the medical bag closed and levelled an even gaze at the man. I am sure I don't know, Mr. Bolton. Nodding a goodbye, he left the bedchamber before the surgeon could compose a retort. Hathaway strode out behind James and shut the door. So, the situation is bad, said Hathaway. Let's walk over there, away from the door. James inclined his head towards the far end of the hall, steeped in dark and a quiet so profound it was as if the entire house held its breath in anticipation of James's verdict. It's definitely advanced pneumonia. She might only have another day. Dash! But I did everything I could think of, Hathaway scrubbed his tired hands through his hair. She has 2 small children, you know, and she's only 24, my age. Cold tension spasmed along James' neck. 24 had been Mariah's age as well. He pushed the memories back before they could rise, ugly like distorted fungi, in a damp, dark corner, the memories of his ultimate failure. Edmunds, you all right? Hathaway asked. You've turned a funny shade. I'm fine. James waved away the query, letting the cool hush of the hallway still the tumult in his soul. Hard to believe more than 3 years had passed and the shock and guilt could still strangle. No need to worry about me. Concentrate on your patient. She needs your full attention. I don't like to admit this, but I'm at a loss what to do next. Nothing, I suppose. All you can do is provide some comfort, a scruple of nitre for the fever, keep her cool and quiet, laudanum for the pain. He glanced over at the door. And get Bolton out of there. She can't handle any more blood loss. Hathaway nodded briskly. I just wish I had your fortitude, Edmunds. I've never lost a patient before, you know. I don't know what to do. James felt his gut clench. He had precious little advice to offer. Show a bold front, lad, his father's favourite words. Pray. Easy for you to say. Not really. James started down the carpeted stairs, his coat-tails slapping against his medical bag in his haste to depart. Do you have an attendant to sit with her that might provide you some relief and let you clear your thoughts? I've been so busy lately I haven't had the time to hire one. James glanced over his shoulder at his colleague. He remembered when he'd been like Hathaway, young, fresh, throwing life aside to plunge into medicine headlong and heedless. After 8 years, though, that eagerness was already burned out of him. I would stay to help you, but I've a woman coming from Ireland any minute now, and I have to get back home and see her settled. You've decided to hire a replacement attendant? They rounded the landing. Hathaway hurried to keep up. I thought you were quitting your practice and leaving London, heading at last for your little farm in Essex. I am looking for someone to fill in for Miss Guimond for the next month, but this Irishwoman isn't a nurse. I've hired her for what is only a temporary situation, a favour for a family friend. James descended the final steps. It doesn't mean I've changed my mind about giving up medicine. Hathaway uttered a sound halfway between a laugh and a grunt, which I still cannot believe. At times neither could James. They reached the entry hall, and Hathaway shook James's hand. Thanks for helping me here, and good luck to you. You're a good man, and you will be hard to replace. A good man, am I? You think too highly of me, Hathaway. James bade the other man farewell, and Hathaway headed back upstairs to deliver his bad news. The maid waiting by the open front door held out James's hat and gloves along with his discreetly bundled fee. A young child hid behind her skirts. James could see a tiny hand clutching the edge of the maid's apron. Here you are, sir, she said to James. She twisted to pat the child on the head. Come now, little miss. Stop hiding behind my skirts there. The doctor here's been to see your mum. She'll be up and about soon. The child shuffled out from hiding. She smiled shyly, alas, 3 or 4 years of age, her eyes, her hair. James's chest constricted. The child was so like Amelia, nearly the same size, the same golden curls, blue eyes. In a day or so the girl would be motherless too, just like his daughter. An impulse opened James's mouth to say hello, but he couldn't get the word to come out. Not when he could hardly breathe. Pulse tripping, he nodded to the girl and made a hasty escape. A good man. Dearest Lord, help me believe it's still true. Here we are, dearie. Mrs. O'Rourke brandished a hand in the air above the steamer's railing, the thunk of the gangway upon the stone pier nearly drowning out her words. London town! Rachel stared at the masses of people churning on the wharf like chickens fighting over a fresh throw of feed. Oh, my heavens! Truer words were never spoken, concurred Mrs. O'Rourke. They had steamed up the Thames for several hours, the city approaching like an advancing storm cloud. Buildings pressed against the riverbanks in such quantity, they blocked out the view of the alleyways beyond. So thick, Rachel could imagine their steamer was chugging through a tunnel of brick and stone. A tunnel jammed with drifting barges and scuttling wherries and blackened colliers, thick as fallen branches choking a weir. And now this. St. Catherine's docks were the greatest collection of buildings and masted ships Rachel had ever seen in her life. Ever dreamed she would see. She tried to count the boats, tucked so tightly against each other it seemed a man could jump from one deck to the next without fear of getting wet, and lost track after 240. At the water's edge, yellow brick warehouses 6 stories high surrounded the basin, bristling with pulleys at open windows, bales and barrels and wine casks stacked to the vaulted ceilings. Men and boys clambered everywhere, thousands of them. They scrabbled for space between loaded carts and wagons, crates of chickens waiting to be loaded onto the next boat out, sacks of flour and coffee. Deafening shouts bested the rattle of boat chains and the squeals of pigs being toted off ships, the clang of ships' bells and a band on a foreign steamer heartily blowing unfamiliar tunes. All of it a noisy sea of flesh and commerce writhing beneath a hazy, reeking, smoke-heavy sky. And not a blade of grass or patch of heather to relieve the oppression. Oh, it's not like home, is it? Asked Rachel, her heart hammering. London will completely consume me. But wasn't that what she wanted it to do? Let it hide her from her past? Oh, nothing's like home, Mrs. O'Rourke sniffled, wiping a coarse woolen sleeve beneath her nose. Oh, you'll make me cry, you will, and here I've held it back all this while. I am sorry. I did not mean to upset you. Rachel tucked her carpet bag with its cracking leather handles against her hip and took her companion's arm. Shall we go? Mrs. O'Rourke nodded. 'Tis nothing else for it. Stiff-legged from the 3 days spent in the cramped confines of steerage, they pushed their way into the throng tramping down the gangway and onto the teeming wharf. A dock worker knocked against Rachel and continued up the plank to become part of the stream of people moving on and off the steamer. If they didn't move speedily, they would either be run over or shoved into the oil-slicked water like so much garbage. Mrs. O'Rourke found her bearings, and Rachel followed the other woman in single file, their destination a set of rooms for departing and arriving passengers. "Ho!" Mrs. O'Rourke cried out before they reached the dubious security of the grimy windowed space carved out of a corner building. "Look, Dan! My sister sent her eldest to meet me, and there he is now, to be sure." She made to move off toward a young man waving frantically over the heads of 100 others. Rachel grabbed Mrs. O'Rourke's elbow. "Are you not going to wait with me?" "See all the guards? There's be nothing to be frightened of." "I own I think there is." "You'll be fine, Rachel. 'Tis a fearsome city it is, but God watches over the least of his sparrows, does he not?" She patted Rachel on the cheek with dry fingertips. "Wrath diort, lass. You've had a stroke of bad luck, you have, but the good Lord will see you through." "Right now, Mrs. O'Rourke, I simply wish he would help me find my employer's carriage." "Ask for Dr. Edmunds in the passenger's office, and know I'll be praying for you." Mrs. O'Rourke hoisted her bag and melted into the crowd, her rust-red cloak soon swallowed up by all the bodies. Snatching up her carpet bag, Rachel elbowed a path toward the passenger area and the waiting lines of wagons and carriages. She wished she still believed she could say a prayer that might calm her fears. Rachel pulled in a breath, sucking in the stench of sweating bodies and rotting fish rather than courage. "I will be strong, mother." For what else had she left? "Now then, are you in need of lodging, miss?" The man's voice at her side startled her. "What?" Dressed in a worn frock coat, the original shade of which was long lost to the jumble of fantastically coloured bits of cloth sewn on elbows and cuffs and pockets, the man was squat, smelly, and leaning far too close. "I asked if you needin' a lodging. Off the steamer from Ireland, are you?" he asked, his soft Irish lilt tugging at her already homesick heart as much as the sight of his combing tilted sideways on his head. "Yes, but someone is meeting me here." "Are you certain now? 'Tis a good lodging house, so it is, for the lasses no more than 6 to a room." He gripped her sleeve. "And there's none of that fever of the cholera in me house, not like those other places." "Cholera? I am most certain I do not require lodging. Please now, let go of my arm." "Might be no other offers, you know. Lodging's hard to come by." "Let go now." She jerked her arm free of his grasp. "Think you're too good, do you?" He muttered a curse and turned to the other woman standing nearby. She must have come off the boat too, though Rachel didn't recognise her. She looked barely past 18. Yet she had 2 children with her, one clinging to her threadbare shift, the other cradled in her arms. "Now, Mom, you look in need of lodging, you do," the man declared. "That I am," the woman said, her voice barely audible above the noise on the wharf. Her face carried the marks of hard work and poverty, lines and freckles and dirt drawing a map of her desperation. Rachel knew she should move away. This woman and her children were none of her concern. Then the smallest child coughed, her tattered woven blanket falling away from her head. Dark eyes peered out of a tiny face, glossy and fever-bright. Eyes so like Mary Ferguson's. Rachel lurched as the pain and the anger and the guilt hit her again. She stumbled into the crowd, pushed her way through, her carpet bag banging into people, drawing shouts of, "Watch out where you're going, and lousy Irish!" She didn't care. At last she broke through the stifling worst of it and reached the passenger arrival area. She found a spot in the queue and shuffled along with the rest until she reached a counter and a hurried clerk. His glance was brisk and disparaging. "Arriving or departing?" "Arriving. Has Dr. Edmunds checked on the arrival of Miss Dunne off the Somerville?" "No. Next." The man behind her attempted to muscle forward, trotting on Rachel's boot. "Then how am I to find him? There are hundreds of people out there." The clerk frowned through his spectacles. "Next." Dejected, Rachel marched back outside the office and looked around. Not 20 yards off, a lad with a tattered cap peered down from a gig, the vehicle's wheels painted an eye-catching vermilion. His gaze danced over her face, then scanned the dockside again. She wasn't sure who he sought. Setting down the carpet bag, she waited. Carriages, carts pulled up, wheeled off. The crowds thinned, leaving Rachel quite conspicuously alone. Had Dr. Edmunds been confused as to the date of her arrival? Was she going to have to take lodging with that horrid man still plying the wharf? As if he could read her thoughts, the lodging fellow looked her way, his thick eyebrows waggling, an open invitation to take him up on his offer. She glared back. She would rather sleep on the docks than go with him. Though how stupid and dangerous that would be, Rachel Dunne. Such a course of action wouldn't be wise even in Carlo. Rachel turned her back to him and searched her surroundings again. The lad and the carriage were gone, his passenger collected, she assumed. To make matters worse, another boat had come in, disgorging more new arrivals who crowded the dock with their baggage and bodies, jolting her like she was invisible. If she could, she would hire a cart to take her to Dr. Edmunds, but she hadn't the funds. At some point, he would have to come for her. She hoped.